I want to tell you about the last world I ever built in Minecraft, and why I never opened it again. It started the way most of my world started: a fresh seed, a spawn point on a low grassy hill, a river cutting through pale birch trees to the east. I named the world Hollow Ridge, because that's what the map looked like from above once I'd explored it. A long spine of stone running through the middle of the land, hollow in places, like something had already been digging there before I arrived. I play these worlds the way some people read before bed: slow, quiet, no goals, no deadlines, no one watching. Just me, a torch, and the soft click of blocks placing themselves into a life I built one piece at a time. I had been playing that way for almost 4 years by the time Hollow Ridge came into existence, and in all that time, nothing strange had ever happened to me. I want you to remember that, because it matters. I was not the kind of player who saw shapes in the dark and called them monsters. I built my house, I mined my tunnels, and I slept when the sun went down. Same as always. The first house I built was small 4 walls of spruce planks, a single window facing the river, a bed pushed into the corner. It took me 2 in-game days to finish it, and on the third night, I stood at that window and watched the water for a long time before I went to sleep. That's a habit I have. I like to watch the world settle before I close my eyes in it. That third night, the water was moving wrong. I don't mean it looked glitched or laggy or anything I could point to and say, "There, that's the bug." I mean, it was moving against the current. Small ripples, drifting upstream, slow and steady, like something was walking against the flow just beneath the surface. I watched it for almost a full minute before I told myself it was nothing, closed the game, and went to bed. My actual bed, in my actual house. I remember that part clearly, because it was the first night in 4 years of playing that I checked the lock on my bedroom door before I fell asleep. I want to be honest with you. I didn't think about Herobrine. Not that night. I'd heard the name the way everyone has old forum threads, grainy screenshots, a story that was debunked so many times it became a kind of joke. Something you brought up around a campfire because it was fun to pretend you believed it. I didn't believe it. I still don't know if believe is the right word for what happened to me. But I know what I saw, and I know what changed, and I know that by the time I understood what was happening, it was already far too late to simply stop playing. The second thing I noticed came 4 days later, and it was so small that if I hadn't taken a screenshot of my base the day before, I never would have caught it at all. There was a tree missing. Not cut down, there was no stump, no dropped wood, no felled logs lying in the grass. Just an empty square of dirt where a birch tree had stood the day before, as clean and deliberate as if someone had reached into the world and lifted it straight out. I sat there for a long time, looking at that empty patch of ground, and for the first time since I started building in Hollow Ridge, I had the distinct, crawling feeling that I was not playing alone. I told myself it was a mob griefing bug. Creepers do that sometimes, wander close enough to a sapling, and some quirk in the way the game handles collision makes a block disappear without a drop. I'd seen it happen before, or something like it, years ago in another world. So I filed it away, the way you file away a strange noise in an old house, and I kept building. I started the mine that weekend. Hollow Ridge earned its name honestly. The stone spine running through the map was riddled with natural caves, and I didn't have to dig more than a few blocks down before I broke into a cavern system that opened up beneath my feet like a throat. I remember standing at the edge of that first drop, torch in hand, feeling the particular kind of quiet you only get underground in that game. A quiet that isn't silence, exactly, because there's always some far-off sound. Water dripping, stones settling, something moving just out of render distance that you tell yourself is a cave spider. I mined for 3 days straight. Coal, then iron, then a vein of redstone that ran deeper than I expected, curling downward into a part of the cave system I hadn't mapped yet. And it was somewhere in that unmapped dark, torch held out in front of me, that I found the first tunnel. I want to be precise about this, because precision is the only thing that convinces me, even now, that I wasn't imagining it. A natural cave in Minecraft is chaotic. It bulges and narrows at random. It has no rhythm. The tunnel I found was 2 blocks high and 1 block wide, running dead straight into the stone for as far as my torchlight could reach, and every single block of it had been mined in a perfect, unbroken line. Nobody digs like that unless they mean to. I stood at the mouth of it for a long time. I want to tell you, I turned around, went home, and never went back, because that's what a smart person would have done. And for years afterward, I've wished I could tell this story that way. But I didn't. I walked in. The tunnel went on longer than any single mining trip I'd ever made. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes of walking through perfectly cut stone, torch flickering against walls that never once deviated from that same tight, deliberate shape. And then, somewhere around the 3-minute mark, my torchlight caught something at the very edge of its reach, and I stopped walking. There were footprints in the tunnel floor. Not mob tracks. Minecraft doesn't render footprints. Not in vanilla, not ever. And I want you to sit with that fact the way I had to sit with it in that moment. Because it means what I was looking at should not have been possible. But there they were, pressed into a patch of gravel that had spilled from a break in the ceiling, 2 rows of shallow depressions leading further into the tunnel, away from me, spaced the way a person's steps are spaced when they're walking, not running, not searching, just walking, like they had somewhere to be. I did what anyone does in that situation, which is nothing useful. I stood there. I watched the footprints. I told myself, out loud, in my empty room, that it was a texture glitch, a rendering artifact, a trick of low light on gravel blocks, and every single explanation felt thinner than the last one as I said it. Then my torch went out. Not burned out Minecraft torches don't do that. It simply stopped. One frame, it was lit, throwing that warm orange circle against the tunnel walls. And the next frame, the tunnel was black, full black. The kind of black that game only shows you when something has gone very wrong with the light source. And in that black, for exactly as long as it takes to draw one breath, I heard something that was not footsteps, and was not dripping water, and was not any sound that cave had made in the 3 days I'd been mining it. It was breathing. Slow, even, close. I alt-tabbed out of the game so fast my hand was shaking on the mouse, and I sat in my dark bedroom for a long time before I worked up the nerve to open it again. I didn't play again for 2 days. I told myself that was because I was busy, which was a lie I was almost good enough to believe. On the 3rd day, curiosity did what curiosity always does, and I opened Hollow Ridge again, half expecting the world to look exactly the way I'd left it. Torch dead, tunnel dark, breathing gone quiet the moment I stopped listening for it. My character had respawned at the house, same as always. The tunnel and the breathing left far behind underground. Everything above ground looked untouched. The river still ran the wrong direction some nights, but the birch forest stood full and unbroken, and for a while I let myself believe that whatever had happened down in that tunnel had stayed down in that tunnel, sealed away from the rest of my world. I spent that session doing quiet, ordinary things. I expanded the house. I planted a small wheat field along the riverbank, the way I always do when a world starts to feel like home. I did not go back underground, and it was near the end of that session, walking the shoreline to check on a boat I'd left tied at a little dock, that I saw him standing across the river. He was too far to make out clearly, just a humanoid shape at the tree line on the far bank, still as a fence post, facing my direction. My first thought was villager. My second thought was that villagers don't stand in forests. And by the time I'd formed a third thought, I had already opened my inventory, pulled up a spyglass, and looked closer. I have thought about what I saw through that spyglass more times than I can count, and I still don't have a way to describe it that feels complete. It looked like a player skin, the same blocky proportions, the same flat textured arms and legs I'd looked at 10,000 times in my own reflection off a water bucket. But the skin itself was wrong in a way that took my eyes a moment to catch up to. The face had no texture at all beyond two flat white squares where the eyes should be. No pupils, no shading, just a blank, glowing white that seemed to hold its own light even in the shade of the trees. And it was looking directly at me. Not near me, not toward my general area, the way a mob's hitbox sometimes fools you into thinking you're being watched. Directly at me, with a specific, deliberate attention of something that knows exactly where you are and has been waiting for you to notice. I lowered the spyglass. When I raised it again, the figure was gone. I want to tell you, I closed the game there. I didn't. Some old, stubborn part of my brain, the same part I think that made me walk into that tunnel, needed to know whether the far bank held any trace, that he'd been real. I got in the boat. I crossed the river. I walked to the exact spot where the figure had been standing, and at first I found nothing at all, just packed dirt and a scatter of fallen leaves, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then I looked down. Written into a patch of sand at the base of the nearest tree, in letters too clean and too deliberate to be anything but placed there on purpose, 3 words had been carved into the world itself, using nothing but the shape of the blocks. I see you. I stood over those words for a long time, the way you stand over something you already understand but haven't let yourself believe yet. The sun was setting in game. My torches were still packed away in the house across the river. And somewhere behind me, close enough that I felt it before I heard it, the leaves on that tree line began, very softly, to move. I ran for the boat. I want to say I did it calmly, the way I'd handled 100 close calls before in 100 other worlds, but there was nothing calm about it. I mashed the movement keys, missed the dock twice, and by the time I finally got the boat into the water, the sun had dropped below the horizon, and the sky had gone that deep, bruised blue. That means the game is done, being gentle with you. I paddled back across the river without looking behind me, which is a strange thing to type because there is no behind in a first-person game unless you make one, and I made one anyway, in my head, the whole way across. I reached my dock, abandoned the boat, and ran for the house, and it was only once I was inside, door closed, that I let myself breathe. Then I looked at my torches. Every single one I had placed around the doorway, along the garden fence, lining the path down to the water, was out. Not missing, not griefed. And out, every wick dark, as if something had walked the entire perimeter of my house while I was gone, and snuffed each one by hand, methodically, in order, leaving the frames of the torches standing empty like a row of small black gravestones. I did the only sensible thing left to me. I placed new torches, as many as my inventory would hold, jamming them into every wall and corner of that little house, until the whole place glowed like a lantern. I barricaded the door with cobblestone. I climbed into the bed in the corner and set my spawn point, and I told myself that whatever was out there, it couldn't get through solid stone, because in 4 years of playing this game, nothing ever had. I didn't sleep. I sat there, character standing at the window, watching the dark press up against my little circle of light, and for almost 10 full minutes, nothing happened at all. Long enough that I started to believe I'd imagined the whole thing, the torches going out on their own from some innocent bug, the words in the sand, some old griefing script left behind by a previous world owner, the figure crossed the river, just a stray villager. My brain had dressed up in nightmares because I'd been staring at a screen too long. Then I heard the first block break. Not near the door, not near any wall I could see. Below me, a single, sharp crack of stone giving way, muffled by distance, coming from somewhere underneath the floor of my house. The same house I had built on solid ground, with no basement, no cellar, nothing beneath it but bedrock I had never once mined into. A second crack followed the first, then a third, closer, each one landing with the patient, unhurried rhythm of someone who wasn't in a rush, who had, in fact, all the time in the world, because he already knew exactly where the tunnel he was digging was going to end. Directly beneath my bed. I stood up. I grabbed every block of cobblestone I had left and started sealing myself into the smallest space I could make. No windows, no gaps, Just four solid walls of stone around a single crafting table and a bed I no longer had any intention of using. My hands were shaking so badly on the keyboard that I placed half the blocks wrong the first time and had to break and replace them. And the whole time, underneath me, the cracking sound kept climbing closer, patient as a clock, until it stopped directly beneath my feet with a silence that was somehow louder than the digging had been. I stood in the dark inside my own walls, torch raised, waiting for a floor that I knew with absolute certainty was about to open. It didn't open. That's the part I still can't explain, even now, even after telling this story more times than I can count. The floor stayed whole. The cracking stopped. And for almost a full minute, I stood in that sealed little room, torch trembling in my hand, listening to nothing at all, until the silence itself became the thing I was afraid of. Then, very quietly, from the other side of the stone wall, in front of me, not below, not underneath, but beside me, level with my own eyes, I heard three soft taps, evenly spaced. Deliberate. The exact rhythm of someone knocking, politely, on a door they already know won't be answered. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Or at least it felt that way. In the strange, half-real way, you forget you're only a person sitting at a desk, controller cooling in your hands, heart going twice as fast as the character on your screen. The taps came a second time. Then they stopped, and this time they didn't come back. I sat in that sealed box of cobblestone until the in-game sun came up, watching my little sliver of torchlight, waiting for a sound that never returned. When morning finally broke, I broke one block from the wall, just enough to look out, and the world beyond it was exactly as I'd left it, the river running the right direction for once. The wheat field swaying gold along the bank, birds somewhere I couldn't see, no hole in my floor, no footprints outside the walls. No sign anywhere that anything at all had spent the night circling my house like something deciding whether it was hungry. I broke the rest of the wall down. I stepped outside into ordinary daylight, and for a moment, just a moment, I let myself believe it was over. That's when I saw the sign. It hadn't been there the night before. I would have noticed it, the way you notice everything in a space you've spent 4 in-game days memorizing down to the last block. It stood just outside my door, planted in the dirt at the exact spot where I always stopped to look at the river before I went inside. And on it, in the same clean, deliberate lettering I'd found carved into the sand across the water, were 4 words. See you next world. I never went back into Hollow Ridge. I still have the world file. I've never deleted it, and I don't think I ever will, because some part of me, the same stubborn part that walked into that tunnel, that crossed that river, that has never once in my life been able to leave a mystery alone, still wants to know what would happen if I opened it again. I haven't started a new world since. Not because I think Herobrine is real. Not exactly. Not in the way people mean when they say that word. I think what I found in Hollow Ridge was something older than any single myth. Something that lives in the space between a game and the person playing it. In the gap where you forget, just for a second, that none of it can actually see you back. But every world I've ever built has had a river in it somewhere. And some nights, before I fall asleep, I find myself wondering whether, if I opened a new one tonight, planted my torches, built my little house by the water, I would look up one evening, glance across to the far bank, and find him already standing there, waiting, like he'd never really left at all. End.